Yeah, so to start, just a quick introduction. My name is Gareth Pearson. I am the founder of Stadium. Stadium I describe as a purpose-driven property development company. And by that, our approach is really around pursuing property development as a means of making a better city. And so we do that in different ways. One is, our own projects, Fenwick Lane being one of them, and then also working with collaborating with other developers or offering advice on other projects at whether on a smaller scale, individual sort of single residential properties and renovations and additions and how to approach those things. Also to more recently, a number of interesting larger projects and sort of multi-unit residential conversions and that kind of thing. Yeah, it evolves all the time, but it's I think as we do more and more work with other people, I think it's finding that the value we add is really in bringing identity and meaning to places, and it's work that I certainly enjoy. But we're here to speak about Fenwick Lane. So very happy that Heinrich could join us this evening. Heinrich Wolff is one of the directors of Wolff Architects, who we have worked closely with on the design for Fenwick Lane. They are highly regarded around the world for, I think, not only their exceptional architectural work and the buildings they've designed, but also their sort of critical research and advocacy work that comes out of the studio. So I'm not going to read out Heinrich's CV because we might be here too long, but very happy that he can join us here this evening and speak a bit more about this project. There are a lot of cool ideas in it, and I think it's the kind of thing that only gets across when when you're able to actually speak about it in a bit more detail. Cool. So I'm going to get cracking. Let me share my screen, and then we can work through this. So let me just start and pull up. This is what we want. Okay, collapse that. Let me just try and let me just, for simplicity's sake, let me start here. Okay, so basically, I think a starting point for this, we'll come back to Fenwick Lane specifically, but I think the first point to make here is that Cape Town as a city has a massive housing shortage, and that's not just on with affordable housing and basic housing needs. That really is across many sectors, and those sectors they filter into each other, and they're not independent. The sort of city bowl housing market is intertwined with the sort of inner suburbs and how that affects housing stock and property prices, and that really is leads to things like increasingly unaffordable property in areas like Woodstock and Cape Town's inner suburbs. So that's kind of where the starting point for this project was that, I think, looking at I think housing opportunities close to Cape Town CBD, and the largely unaffordable for certainly the majority of the city opportunities sort of within close proximity to the center. At the same time, I think a lot of the new housing that is being built to address that need is happening along the periphery. So just looking at this map here, here we have the center and Cape Town's inner suburbs, and we kind of get further and further out, and you can see a bit of the periphery here along the west coast, where you can see the scars in the landscape where new tracts of land are being opened up for basically large new low density housing estates. And I think the most obvious way, this is unsustainable development on many levels, but the most obvious way in which we experience that is through increasingly bad traffic. And I think Cape Town, out of all South African cities, has, I think, the worst traffic congestion, and it's really only going to get worse. I think if anyone thinks working from home or self-driving cars or anything like that is going to make it better, I'd put my money on that not happening. But these are kind of the ideas that informed I think the beginnings of this project. So we looked at this and asked the question whether there is an alternative way to address some of this housing need and essentially build well-designed, good quality home ownership opportunities close to the CBD and at affordable, relatively accessible price points. So that I'll get into maybe the specifics of how we thought about doing that, but it's largely around infill development within existing suburbs, and instead of building out on the periphery or building sort of larger new developments, it's squeezing in those new homes within existing suburbs. So I have to use my mouse here. So yeah, I think so. I'll come back to this image, but this is a view of the site of Fenwick Lane, looking back at the city, and I'll get into why we ended up choosing this particular site and area. But it is, I think the best way to do this is probably just to actually show you on maps. So let me quickly close that and just open up. I think this should work. Okay, so looking on Apple Maps, obviously a lot of you will be familiar with the layout of Cape Town. Here you have the center. Here's Woodstock, Salt River Observatory. If you're looking at anything beyond this inner ring of suburbs, that next ring out essentially gets to sort of Maitland, Brooklyn, Milnerton. You can see Pinelands in here, the southern suburbs. But Brooklyn as a neighborhood is nestled. It's largely overlooked. A lot of people are familiar with it, but the majority, I would say, are not. It's a super interesting small neighborhood tucked in there, just on the other side of Pardon Island. So you have Maitland over here. Here's where this big, sort of somewhat controversial Amazon development is. Woodstock, Salt River. There is Brooklyn. And if we zoom in a bit, you can see the N1 comes through here. This is Coburg Interchange. Coburg Road runs up this way, but the way this greater neighborhood is broken up, you've got Easterplaat on this side, Rugby up on this end. This becomes Milnerton, and then Brooklyn essentially includes sort of this section here. This being the upper end of Brooklyn. Milnerton Market as a landmark is up on this side, but this section over here is the quieter part of Brooklyn, which is, as I said, largely overlooked, mainly because there are no thoroughfares going through there. So not many people are familiar with it. The only road, the main spine that cuts through Brooklyn is Kings Road, which cuts through the neighborhood and then back onto Coburg Road. But this section, there are no other roads across here. So it's actually quite a quiet residential suburb. And then just to maybe provide some context quickly, or just to be able to locate the site, here it is here. This is the site of Fenwick Lane. So it's a strange leftover patch of land. It's never been built on. It was obviously subdivided at some point. This neighboring house was built within the last 10 years. And then you've got this section of Fenwick Street running along the back here. And that is, it's not, it's a strange, obviously just the way this developed over time. It's technically a road reserve, but because of it, the way it intersects with this intersection, it'll never actually become a road. So it's a pedestrian path that runs through here. And so when we talk about Fenwick Lane, this is the lane. And then this is Deep Street over here and Shaddock Street on the other side. So it sits on this corner, within this part of Brooklyn. And then 2 blocks down, you have this big park space. Nearby over here is Bill Riley Butchery. They've been there forever. It's a 3rd generation family-owned business. And the reason why it's interesting is largely because I'm sure a lot of you will have seen their delivery vans around town. They distribute to restaurants all over the place. But it brings, a typical suburb, on any given day is relatively quiet. And, although this part of Brooklyn is pretty quiet, it's a really great addition where it just brings, I think, a welcome energy and people coming and going to the neighborhood in this little pocket of Brooklyn. So that's just up the road there. And then just the way it fits into the surrounding area. I think before I forget, I think one of the main reasons we chose this site and Brooklyn, and the fact that there is this little developable piece of land within quite a nice suburban area close to the CBD, is its proximity to the My City bus route. So you've got a short walk down the road here, and this over here is the nearest My City bus station, the Freestad station. And these are these sort of main enclosed sort of subway-like stations that have, I think they're always staffed with a security person on duty. But this is such a massive asset, not only for this particular route as well, it's so highly used, along this West Coast area, but it means, whether you're going north up through Milnerton or into the CBD, it's a super short bus ride into town, like jumping on the bus here. It stops at every stop on this dedicated bus route, and it's 10 minutes into town. So that's one of the main reasons we settled on this site. And then in the other direction, you get closer to Coburg Road. I won't go into too much detail here. We have been doing some sort of site visits and neighborhood walks, and we're going to do some more next week. I think if you're keen to get a better sense of the area and actually experience it on foot and on the ground, please do join for those. That's a really fantastic way to just talk in person and work through, talk about the project and the site, but also get a better sense of the neighborhood. So I'm just going to jump back quickly to this other so let's go back to this, where are we, this image. So this showing you that aerial view, just to come back to that, this is the site for Fenwick Lane. This is the lane running through here, and it's actually quite a popular pedestrian route. People coming through from Pardon Island and from the My City bus route, and so people often walk up this road and along this path, and then you get a incredible sense of how close the site is to the CBD, and you can see Devil's Peak over here, and obviously a bit of Table Mountain. The waterfront is on this side to the right, and then Pardon Island, which is, there are some interesting spots within here if you start to explore. Deluxe Coffee Works has their main roastery and a new little cafe just down the road here. There are a number of interesting climbing gyms, indoor climbing gyms, one here and one further up. And then this whole section of Pardon Island, a bit of it below the river on the left here. The river runs through over here. And then on the sort of upper end of the river, that whole section of Pardon Island has been earmarked for rezoning, for development. And there are a whole lot of larger property players who are all have development plans in the pipeline there, I think, for some larger mixed-use residential on Marine Drive, basically, so along that seafront. But yeah, this is really, the more time I've spent in Brooklyn over the last few years, the more I've become a fan of it. It's really a super interesting neighborhood. And yeah, so this image just, I think, gives one a good sense of where it's located and how it relates to Pardon Island on the other side and the park down the road. But that's I think the gist of it in terms of where it's located, but also cognizant of time. And I think it would be great to now get into the specifics. We can come back to, if we've missed anything, maybe come back to introducing the project. Some of you, I realize, might actually be coming in here blind and not knowing much about it, but I think as Heinrich speaks through the design side of it, that might become more clear. So maybe we should jump ahead to that, and then we can always come back to some other things after that. Cool. Heinrich, do you want to pick up from here and
Sure.
I think we must just make sure that you can annotate as well if you need to.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone. Nice to speak to you on this, and I think I'm going to be quite brief, and then we can leave plenty of space for discussion if people want to ask questions afterwards. So I can maybe start with this image, which is the elevation of 5 of the 9 units onto Fenwick Lane, and just say is that Brooklyn is a fascinating suburb in that it is very, very close to the city. It's maybe like Pinelands, or, it's just beyond the belt of the sort of Victorian buildings of Salt River, Observatory, Rosebank, and so on. It's the next layer of buildings. So as modern houses, it's actually very close to the inner city of Cape Town, and it is in a way the development of Pardon Island that separated it historically. But in it being a proper sort of modern suburb, being very close to the city, we were asking ourselves, what would people want here? What is the right thing to offer? Should we make something that's more suburban or something that is more urban? Would people want the kind of density and the sort of metropolitan life, or would people come and live in Brooklyn for its suburban quality so close to the city? And I think that what we were saying is that if we look at the trajectory of Brooklyn over the next 20, 30 years, there will be a densification of Brooklyn, but we are keen to take hold of development opportunities represented by new zoning permissions that the city gave for residential development. And there we were saying, well, let's try and get the best of both worlds. So in other words, what we want is that we want the benefits of conglomeration. In other words, several people being in a road. So these are two properties here. One could have made it in a way that they're just two houses. But 5 houses are better than 2 in that there are more eyes on the street, there's more activity and so on. And we have the benefit of places from the Boerkaap to Rondebosch and so on. And that kind of what slightly higher street-based densities mean in the residential fabric. So hence we're going for these buildings that sit next to each other and present their front doors all out onto the street. So that for us is a fundamental thing, because we could have done another version of an urban building, which is more like an apartment. So in other words, we all have the same entry, and then we go along common spaces into my own private space. But we thought that that wasn't necessarily in the spirit of Brooklyn, and would be much nicer to have your own front door. So what you're seeing here is each one of these units presenting a front gate to the street. I'm just going to draw a little bit over this, but so what you're seeing is that there's a big fence here, a very basic fence. It's transparent and you can see through it. And inside this fence is the main gate there. But what is happening is that right behind this is you have a window to the kitchen and the dining room right behind there. And the beauty of that is that you're standing in the kitchen working and you're looking straight out to whoever is at your gate, and people are looking at the street. So in any given time during the day, what you have is you have 5 different sort of eyes on the road here, sitting behind these windows, and people are looking through the gate, looking back at the street. And that life to the street, it gives security to it and so on. But we were keen in a way to achieve a level of privacy. So what happens is that you enter in here, you go around the corner and your front door actually sits there. But between the entry there and your front door, there's a little space here where you can sit and braai outside and socialize outside and so on. So that is a semi-protected space. It's protected from gazes from the street, so you're sitting a little bit around the corner, but it's also protected from the southeast wind, which sort of comes in that direction. So that wall just screens you, so you can sit out there in the summer when the wind is blowing. But then the other benefit is that from the second story window here, you're getting views out to Table Mountain, because if you look at that aerial photograph, they are just single story buildings ahead of you. So you're actually getting reasonably good views from there. Gareth, maybe you can go on to the next view. So if you have a look at this, let's just do this in a simple way. Along here, you can see there are 5 units, and along here, there are 4 units. That facing out onto Sherlock Street, and this facing out onto Fenwick Lane. And then along this side, there's vehicular entry. And along this side, there's vehicular entry. So for off-street parking from that side. What you do have is that you have a connection, you know, up here. This is within walking distance, then going back to Kubuk Street. And as Gareth showed you, you are within walking distance of both this and that public transport stop. You know, there's also transport going down Kubuk Street. But what is interesting, whether you are taking public transport or whether you are driving yourself, is that you are within the areas of Asplat Air Force Base, people that to work there, or Milnerton area, Montague Gardens, the Parton Island area, even Century City, and so on, or the city beyond that. So there's a fair access to places where people will be working. And then what we really like about this property, which makes it a truly amazing place, is the green park that's along here, which means that, you know, you just come down the road, walk your dog, you along the river, and it's a very generous space where you can cycle and stroll and do whatever. So that makes this a fantastic kind of an area to live in. And we are trying to develop this area in such a way that it doesn't, its increase in density makes it better rather than worse, so that we get the benefits of urbanization and get away from some of the troubles of suburbia, say increased insecurity or those sorts of things, and resolve those kinds of problems. Maybe you can go on to the next slide. If I talk about the ground floor plan, you can see that in essence, it's 9 identical units, although there are minor departures from it. So if I talk about a basic unit, I would say that it has 3 main parts. The first is a little block like this that we'll get to. Then there is a stair and a bathroom, which sits back there. And then there is a space for expansion of the house, either internally or externally, in many of these units. Not all of them, but many of them. So you can see you have the capacity to expand out there and enlarge the internal space. Those are the main features. I'll talk about the detailed plans in a moment, but I think what's important is that if we go back to this, there you can see would be your main entry. There's the window in the kitchen where you're looking right out, and this is this little space around the corner where you can sit, and you know, it's just outside your kitchen, just outside your unit, but there you can sit protected from the wind, and you can have a braai, and you can have a nice time outside, and so on. It gives you a bit of space over there. There's a bit of landscaping. I can maybe just indicate that. There's some planting that is happening along here. You can see it happens in these sort of L's along here that greens the edge. And this can grow up along the walls and so on. It allows people also the freedom to make their own gardens. In these north-facing spaces, there's space for gardening over here, and in theory, if people want to garden over here, there's plenty of space in each one of these spaces. If you don't want to park your car here, you know, there's all sorts of space for gardening over there. Maybe you can just go up to the upper level, Gareth. So what you can see here is a repeat, an identical repeat of what happened downstairs. Again, the little block, which is a rectangular unit. This cupboard is loose and can be taken out. The doors can be omitted in this development. And then you can see here on the side, this little block with the bathroom and the staircase sitting over there, with a tiny little bridge in between the two. Now, the benefit of this means that one could enter in here and actually come out here, so that there's sort of free movement in between those, and we can discuss that. But in essence, the classic unit as you see it here is basically then a 2-bedroom unit, 1 bedroom there, another bedroom there, with a built-in cupboard that divides these 2 units. But that, of course, if you omit the built-in cupboard, this could be one big unit like that. All right, maybe just go on to the next drawing. If we look at it in slightly more detail, you can see is that the inside of these units are flexible in that a variety of layouts are possible. You could, for instance, go and put your table over here. It would be tight, but it's not common in kitchens, that people prefer to have a little table right inside there that people sit and work right there with the washing space behind. So to give you an idea, this is 900 by 900. That's the size of a classic restaurant table inside there. That would be a possibility, but you can see we indicated the table right in the middle here with a sense of a eating space, living space, and so on. But this is to be configured as people want. Some people saying, well, we never eat a dining room, we eat in front of the television, and then you can make the living room more luxurious. Or what some people may want to do is put a very big table there because they like sitting around the table, lots of family coming and going, and that they might even have a sleeper couch there where people are sitting and talking and somebody else can sleep at night. All sorts of things are possible. But the logic is that the bathroom over here is external to whatever happens on the ground floor and on the first floor, so that it operates independently. And then whatever adjustment somebody feels they want to make to that interior, they are free to do, and it does not affect the wet services of the house. Just go up to the upper level. So you can see there an exact repeat of this. So in theory, you could repeat everything that you had downstairs. You could repeat the kitchen here if you want, with the water points just going straight down. You could have a sleeper couch here. You can have another table. You can do whatever you want. You can make this into a live work studio. So, if this is your bedroom, you can imagine you can just have a study over here, and this becomes in a fairly luxurious kind of a bedroom with a door, say, in there, or the door opening up this way. It's all possible. So that really depends on it. I know Gareth was approached by an artist who was saying this would be a fantastic place to work and paint and do everything as well. So all of that is possible. And I think the significant thing to see is that this cupboard is in essence a loose piece of furniture. If you want to buy here, one of the options is to say you just don't want that cupboard or the doors that go with it, and then you have this whole big space for you to use as you want. And the units are designed in a way that the outside is described, but the inside is much more free and open. All right, next one, Gareth. This just in very, very basic terms give you the section. You can see the downstairs floor. I stand to be corrected, but I think it's about 2.6 meters up to that level and about 2.8, 2.9 meters up to that level. So it's a fairly generous kind of a ceiling height. It's a timber floor and a timber ceiling, which gives the house a wonderful character on the inside. And then what we did with this opening here is we made this a timber panel as well. One is...
Sorry, Heinrich, are you annotating there? Or there we go, okay.
It gives it a nice material sensuality. So there's in the side this double volume space, there is this timber panel, but it also is for somebody who might say, no, I'm actually going to sleep downstairs as well. Then you can have this whole big space upstairs. You want a big studio or something, or if you wanted a big bedroom, you say, no, I want to adjust this. So we make that as a panel that you can take out and adjust yourself. And then the structure is sort of fixed around it, but it allows a great deal of freedom for augmentation of that. But here at the back, you can see significantly what we have here is a space for expanding. Whoops, I'm doing it slightly wrong, but you can see this is a full room size. You can get another bedroom in there on both levels. You can expand it internally, externally, whichever way you want, but it gives you then a space for an additional bedroom. So what you're buying is not just a house, but a very well-designed, well-considered outside space, ideal for being able to add another room. You can see here this cupboard being loose, and you could omit that if you want. And you can see here we now have the seat here, front door is over there, somebody would be walking here. Sorry, this pen is very thick. And then this is a space where you can sit and braai, and there's a little seat on the one side. You can add in some other chairs. The front door is here, and you can walk right through the house to whatever you have in the back. So you don't go through the rooms, in essence, to get to the back of the house. All right. Are there any other images, Gareth? I think.
Yeah, there's just these elevations.
So if you go back here, again, there's a window where you're looking out on the street. There's a window where you're looking out at Table Mountain. There's another window here that's at the head of the stair where, again, you can overlook the street. And it just means that wherever people are in the house, there's an extent of overlooking of the public domain. So we're building a wall because we think that that security makes people feel better in terms of being on that lane, so that you don't sit right out on the outside. This is not the Boerkaap where there's a degree of separation between the street space and the space of the house. You're right on the same grade, but it means that you're sitting right there. You have your own private space, but at the higher levels, there's a great degree of overlooking of the street. And this repeats itself on the other side as well. I think I'm going to leave it here. Gareth, is there anything else you want me to comment on?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll just add here maybe it's hard to tell from these elevations, but these square windows, that one you see on the facade, that's, it looks relatively small. That's the width of a door, and it's actually quite a large window. And then these, the sort of larger window here, that's essentially repeated in some form on the other side of the house. I think someone had put forward a question of sort of a north window on one of the units, and it's worth, I think, just saying that almost all of the units except for unit 2 has very good north exposure. And there's actually quite sizable windows where there's a lot of, I think it's been quite considered with the light that's coming in there and the quality of light that comes into that double volume void, and then into the living areas of the house. But just to make that clear, that's this is, you can almost see that this is repeated on the other side of the house.
Yes.
Yes,
that's 1.2 meters by 1.2 meters, that window.
Okay, yeah.
Good one.
Yeah, and then there was just this elevation. This shows the elevation from Deep Street, where those two sort of parking space entries are, and it kind of shows that side elevation of each row of houses, and the way on Shaddock Street those houses step back, and it actually creates a really interesting sense of sort of containment and enclosure with these private backyards, but where they're actually quite nicely protected, and I think that's going to be a very nice space. Yeah, I think, Heinrich, there are a few I added in these renders just to give a sense of, maybe not to take these too literally, but these, trying to translate those drawings into sort of a three-dimensional volume. It gives one a sense of what that space is like. So this is not 100% accurate. If you look at the kitchen space here, that square window would actually be a taller sort of rectangular window that looks out through to the gate, as Heinrich described. This would be the front door, and then sort of as you come into this space, there's that double volume void up here, and then this shelf. It's just really for illustration. This void here, the sort of recess where the stairs go up, could be used for anything. One could put in some sort of shelf like that. You could put a desk in there. You could just leave it open so that the staircase is much more open. There are various ways one can use that little space. This is just looking the other way. So if you look, you can see the stairs go up, and then to the right, here's this double volume void. This is sort of looking back into the backyard. So that's that view. And then just to give a better sense of the bedrooms, this would be the main bedroom, looking through to the smaller second bedroom. And as Heinrich explained, this cupboard unit, which is a perfectly sufficient wall, but can very easily be left out or removed at a later stage. And so it makes this this floor and I think just each unit in itself extremely adaptable to different needs, whether that's in the short term or thinking ahead, even over the next 20, 30, 50 years. A nice way to think about, I think building something is as a new piece of the city. And this, it's easy to imagine, someone moving in there and the way they might live, but these are buildings that are going to be around for a very long time. So how do you design for those changes and for different needs? Maybe just a point to go back to Heinrich, what you were saying just about how it's designed so that you could make those additions at the back. I think that's something that might be done in the very long term, or at least if that is the way that the logical way for these spaces to expand. I think each owner or resident has quite a bit of freedom with how the internal spaces work and what you do with those spaces. I think just to factor in that this is 9 units that will be sectionalized, and so what you do on the outside in essence has to be done with consideration for how it affects neighboring properties. So that's just something to take into consideration, but certainly it allows for that adaptability over time. I think I don't know what else. Maybe we could come back to anything if there's anything else on the design, but quickly I realize our goal of 30 minutes we missed by a long shot, but I think we're close to wrapping up here. I won't go into this in detail, but this is information that's in the brochure. How these units have been priced is all of the units have they're all very similar, except every single unit is different in some way. Some have things that others don't. And so you can see here, just with this table, the units going from 1 to 9 down on the side here, that corresponds to how these units are numbered. You can see here, 1 to 5 along Fenwick Lane, and then 6 to 9 along Shaddock Street here. So the square meterage is all a little bit different. Some have parking, some don't. Some have only front yards and no backyards. But you can see these units along Shaddock Street all have a slightly larger sort of front yard space, which is already quite generous. And then so this unit here, number 7, the footprint of the building is a little bit smaller, but it's got both backyard and quite a generous front yard. So that information is all there. We get questions all the time. Technically, these units are for sale. We are, haven't been reserving units just yet. There's 1 or 2 things to figure out, but we're close to being able to do that. So I know there are a handful of people who are all kind of waiting in the wings, who are interested in it, these are ongoing conversations. If any of you are, if you are interested in purchasing, and if we haven't actually been speaking yet, you can reach out to us and we can talk through that in more detail. Maybe just to quickly, let me check here if we're missing anything. Okay, just a question on banks. That's what we're just waiting to clear that up. I think the question being just, if someone is securing a bond to purchase one of these properties, they basically have to be pre-approved by the various banks, and that's something we're in the process of. One of the things we're waiting for before we can actually finalize any sales. But we don't see any issue here. There's no material-wise. There's nothing unconventional. These are quite robust, well-built houses, and just in terms of price point and per square meter, quite competitive with similar sectional title property in the area. So we will have clarity on that soon, but that's just to answer that question quickly. And then there was another question on timeline. We are, with a few of these things that I mentioned that we're just waiting to finalize, we're really trying to get everything wrapped up, and so we can start building as soon as possible in the new year. I think realistically, these things take quite long, and once, even after building completion, to get occupation certificates, we're looking at sort of the latter part of next year. I think we're aiming for within Q3 of next year. It might well be around October or a while after that, but that's what we're aiming for, and we should have more clarity on that soon. Otherwise, I think just to wrap up, I think on this, just to close on this, I think it's called Fenwick Lane, and I think because as we started working on this, and developing it further, realizing that the lane that the site faces onto is such a potentially great asset and amenity for those, not only the residents of Fenwick Lane, but the surrounding neighborhood. And it's often quite difficult to look at a patch of grass and imagine something actually coming out of the ground, and what imagining a building and a space. But so if you look at this site drawing and just the lane that is highlighted in green, I think one of the most exciting parts of this project is imagining 9 new households moving into Fenwick Lane and actually taking ownership over this space, which is a public space, but something that can be cared for and actually can become something that is common amongst this cluster of houses, and can actually become a massive asset for those residents, but also the surrounding neighborhood. And just the image on the right is, just to be clear, is not Fenwick Lane. It's an image borrowed from Studio Mutt and Solid Space Homes. It's a project in Liverpool in the UK, but it's just to illustrate, I think, a space of a similar scale, with houses facing onto it, and what the potential of that kind of enclosed laneway space for what that could become. So I think that I'll leave it at that. But if there's anything else, I'll stop sharing my screen. I think I think that's about it. Heinrich, if there's anything else to add, I don't know if you want to add anything further. Sorry, you're muted. I don't know why.
Okay, there I'm unmuted. I think it's important to ask if anyone has a question.
Yeah, if you have any questions, maybe just pop it in the chat. There are a few in here. Well, one I already answered. Are there any other questions?
Maybe people can speak if they want. You can unmute them and we can have a conversation.
I think they might have to ask to unmute themselves. maybe we just give it a second in case anyone does need to. Yeah, sorry if you can't. I'm not going to go and unmute everyone in one go, but if there are any questions, just pop it in the chat box. Yeah, otherwise, I think in the meantime, maybe just to close, Heinrich, thanks so much for also talking through. It's great to also have you. I'm not that familiar with Zoom to know that you can actually annotate over someone else's screen. So it was great to actually for you to be able to draw over those graphics. I think just maybe a note if anyone's interested in joining one of our. We're likely doing another site visit and neighborhood walk next week Saturday, maybe even in the maybe even within the week. There was someone who couldn't make the weekend, but I said we could certainly do that. So whether you're interested in purchasing or just the development in general, you're more than welcome to join those. It's always just great to go for a walk as well. So it's if you would like to join, please let us know. The details, you can look it up online. The stadium's contact details, you can contact me through there. It's great to be able to talk about it. We're very excited to see this thing come to life. If you want to talk through it over the phone, more than happy to do that. So cool. Yeah, thanks. I don't see any direct questions that need to be answered right now. One or two comments, but I think that's just about it. And we're not quite under half an hour, but we're almost under an hour. So maybe it's a good time to call it a day.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks very much, Heinrich.
Okay.
Cheers. Bye.